Not to get too deep into backstory, nor disclose too much personal information about myself, but I'll just come right out and say it, that I've always been a reclusive person, ever since I was a young kid. I didn't have many friends at all, and I spent most of my time playing video games on the computer, or varying consoles I grew up with. As I got older, like high school, I started to get into just going on long walks exploring. I'd walk through the woods, walk through cemeteries, and then I developed an obsession with trespassing, going places I wasn't supposed to be. It started with sneaking into cemeteries at night, then I started getting more experimental with it, like exploring abandoned hospitals and schools. When I was finally able to drive, it made accessing all these places much easier, of course. I only went with one of my few friends once or twice. Honestly, I enjoyed it more by myself. Part of my weirdness includes the fact that I don't get scared exploring abandoned places at night by myself. Or perhaps I should use past tense and say, I didn't used to get scared. How I used to find a lot of abandoned structures was simpler than you might think. I would just go on Google Earth and zoom into rural areas. Then I would look for abandoned-looking structures in unsuspecting places. I would then make a list of 5 to 10 locations of these structures and try to visit them all in one day. Sometimes they wouldn't be abandoned at all, but I eventually got pretty good at gauging which ones would be. This hobby involved a lot of walking through woods, and yes, before you ask, I did have a job. I worked a minimum wage job as a stock boy at a supermarket, so when I wasn't doing that or in school, a lot of time I was doing this. One of the places on my list one day turned out to be an abandoned little church. I had to park on a dirt road and get out of my car to walk. It was about a 10-minute walk. I'd always wear jeans and boots so that I travel faster through the woods without hurting myself. I started noticing old, rusted garbage cans and other junk scattered in the woods, indicating I must have been close. And then I saw the clearing in the distance approaching, along with the structure. And there it was, some dilapidated old church sitting in a random clearing in the woods. It had an old well right in front of the building. I walked over to it to see if it had been sealed, but surprisingly it hadn't been. I looked down, and it was so deep that it was pitch black down there. When I stopped and listened, though, I heard something down there. It was a faint clicking sound. It happens like on a rhythm, 1 click after 2 seconds. It didn't sound like water droplets. The best I could describe it is a stick being tapped on a stone wall. Curious, I stared down for longer than I probably should have, kind of like I was hypnotized by the sound. But eventually, I broke out of my daze and decided to go inside the church. I stepped onto the creaking wood porch, and the rotted boards gave slightly under my weight. The large double doors were ajar, not surprising. Out of all the abandoned structures I'd visited, unless it was a very well-known one posted frequently in subreddits, there wouldn't really be anyone boarding these places up. I pushed one door open further, which led to a loud groan that echoed through the trees. The air inside was thick with dust and the scent of old wood. Light poured through the shattered, stained glass windows. Some of the pews were overturned or missing entirely. The pulpit stood crooked at the front, and behind it, an arched doorway led further into darkness. I did the usual, scanned the inside with my flashlight and took a few pictures from my archive on my digital camera. There was an eerie beauty to the decay, a holy place like a church in near ruin. It was beautiful but tragic. I walked slowly toward the back of the church where the arched doorway was. I stepped through it and found a narrow hallway that led to what looked like old storage rooms. One door was missing entirely, and the others were splintered or hanging off their hinges. Cobwebs clung to the ceiling everywhere, and then I saw at the end of the hallway was a stairway leading down into the basement. Jackpot, I thought. Like I said, I used to not let anything scare me. Nothing within reason, at least. Something about exploring abandoned basements excited me, but this time, something about that basement door hanging open leading to the darkness below made me pause. I honest to God got a slight chill, but I kept going. I started down the stairs slowly, and each step creaked so loud that I feared I'd fall through the wood. And then, I counted 7 steps until my right foot landed on one that gave way with a loud crack, and before I could react, it collapsed under me. I fell hard and landed in a pile of junk and dirt below the stairs. I fell directly on my ass and hurt my tailbone. I let out some kind of audible complaint, probably a "God damn it" or something. My flashlight flew out of my hand, so I crawled over to grab it. That was when I heard a voice. It was a higher-pitched sounding voice, either a woman or a young boy. It was saying words, but I couldn't understand any of them except for one thing. They said hello. The rest was gibberish, like someone trying to talk but didn't know how. I stood up and pointed the flashlight around. It was just an old basement, some busted furniture, mostly cots, a dirt floor, stone walls, but then I saw a tunnel in the wall. It looked like it was dug out by hand. As I approached it, I realized the voice was coming from down there. I started walking toward it. I was being dumb, but I had to know what it was. I stepped just a couple of steps inside the tunnel and looked around. The walls were rough, not smooth. It had definitely been dug out with a shovel by hand. My flashlight started flickering, and I nearly had a heart attack. I hit it a few times, and it stayed on. Doing so made a louder noise than I anticipated, though. The voice got louder, still just gibberish with that same weird tone, but I could now confirm it was coming from deeper inside this tunnel. And then it stopped. Everything was quiet for a few seconds. Then I heard a click. 2 seconds later, another click. Same rhythm and sound as the well, and the sound echoed. These clicks and the gibberish echoing voice were getting louder. My heart was now in my throat, so I turned and ran back. I reached the stairs and remembered one of the steps was broken. I found it easier to grab the sides of the stairs and pull myself up, instead of trying to hop over the broken step. My flashlight dropped, but it didn't matter. I was leaving the basement back to the light of the upstairs. I got to the top and didn't look back. I ran through the hallway, through the main room, and out the front doors. I ran past the well and stopped for a second. The clicking sound was gone. There was no noise at all. Come to think of it, it was dead silent. I didn't even hear any birds. I looked down the well one more time. Still pitch blackness. With that, I turned and ran through the woods, making it to my car much faster than I made it to the church, albeit completely out of breath. I cut the day short and didn't explore the other places on my list. This was just one of those experiences where you don't know what to think, and you just drive home in silence with the music off. I didn't give up my hobby of exploring entirely, but I took a break. I was admittedly very spooked. I hope it was just some other kids exploring in there trying to mess with people, but I don't know. When I think about it, that sounds really unlikely. This happened to me a while ago and is still stuck in my mind. Me and my friends often like to be in the outdoors. I'll refer to my friends as John and Anthony. We were bored and decided to go fishing deep in the woods near some farmland. We were chased out by a farmer and his dog. We tried to hide, but his dog found us and he threatened to call the police, even though he was already on the phone with his friend, which we found weird. Honestly, we kind of found it funny. So for whatever reason, we thought it would be a good idea to go back the next day and sneak onto the property to explore it. It was nearing about an hour before dark, and this property was huge, acres upon acres. We had to hike through some deep woods, similar to the one we had been fishing in before. Although we scoped it out on Google Maps, it was still easy to get lost. I remember thinking to myself that we should be out of there before dark. At first, everything seemed normal, and I wasn't getting any bad gut feelings. We were admiring the horses and petting them. I remember thinking it was weird having all this farmland and only horses. I compared it in my head to my uncle's farm, which is a lot smaller but has about 10 different types of animals, not just one. I just brushed it off and thought that maybe the owner specialized in horses. After walking through the woods, we reached the fence bordering the property. John was leading the way, I was in the middle, and Anthony was behind us. This is when we stumbled upon a rundown house with multiple trophy cars and a broken down RV. We were shocked at the discovery and snuck around some of the cars. There was also a very creepy rundown shed. It was crazy to see. I even took this video.
Fucking Corvette. Raptor. Bentley. Holy shit.
There were multiple Porsches, Range Rovers, Ford Raptors, Bentley sports cars, Corvettes, and Ferraris. The deeper we got and the more cars we saw, we realized we probably shouldn't be seeing this, since some of the cars were parted out. We suspected it was probably a criminal ring stealing cars. After we had seen all the cars, John decided it was a good idea to explore the inside of the camper while Anthony kept lookout. I held the door open for John since he's kind of the smallest, so I thought he would be best suited to explore it. There was evidence somebody was living there, fishing rods, fresh food, bedding, and other stuff. Although the camper was run down, we understood it was somebody's home, so we got out of there. I forgot to mention there were also car tires inside. We were not there to break or destroy anything, just look around. We snuck around to the back of the property where all the cars were. There were side-by-sides, and we made the connection that they were probably used to run the property. There was also a rundown shed, and when we went inside the back of it, we caught a foul, horrible smell. We kind of just brushed it off and laughed, joking that maybe it could be a body. None of us really believed it though. Then we heard the gate at the entrance of the property open and slam. It was about 1,000 feet away. We were heading back to the woodline because we didn't want anyone to see us, and that's when a van turned onto the street we were on. It was nearing dusk and the headlights were on, so we sprinted through the woods, not sure if he saw us. This is when we probably should have left, but we decided to explore the other side of the property. After walking along the outskirts and hiking through more woods, there were a lot more horses, but we finally got to the main house of the property. Again, it seemed very run down. About 25 feet to the right was another camper, or at least what looked like a camper. It was massive, about 50 feet long, and probably hadn't moved in 50 years. We almost missed it because it was completely covered in vines. Right next to it was another rundown jet ski, also covered in vines. We managed to get the door open, but didn't want to make too much noise since we were so close to the main house. Even though it seemed abandoned, we wanted to be cautious, not just because we were trespassing, but because there was similar suspicious stuff on both ends of the property, which I could only assume was connected to the car stealing ring. I knew if we were caught, it would be a problem. We snuck around the house and saw what was probably the most luxurious car on the property. Although it was run down and old, it was still an amazing sports car, a Ferrari. I didn't get a picture or video since we were still near the main house and the horses were making a lot of noise. We got sketched out on the far end of the property. There was a boat and cooler inside a fridge. John looked around the boat, and the cooler was about 15 feet into some very thick vegetation. We joked about the probability of a body being in there. At this point, the mood was still kind of jokey because we were exploring something we weren't supposed to see. When we got closer to the freezer, another terrible smell came, like the smell of death and rot. We decided to back off, assuming the worst, and didn't want to open it in case there was something we really didn't want to see in there. We got a bad vibe, and we were on our way back when Anthony started hearing things. We paused and listened with him, and we heard the noises too. I can't really describe them. I don't know if they were just normal wood noises or if everything just seemed amplified because we were paranoid. The vegetation was about head high, and there was a rock that each of us took turns standing on to get a better view of the property. When John went up there, we were still laughing and joking. Then he turned to us, looking like he had just seen a ghost. He wouldn't speak, so I decided to get on the rock and look for myself. What I saw is seared into my brain. Over the vegetation, I saw a man sitting at a table with a black cat. That wasn't the scary part. When I looked at his face, there was no hair, no eyes, no mouth, no nose, no facial features at all. You can call me crazy, but I know what I saw. We were about 50 feet away, and it felt like the man was staring at us, but we genuinely couldn't see his eyes since he had no features. There was also a woman with him who made direct eye contact with me, and that was the moment she started running in a direction to cut us off from the property. I don't know if the man's featureless face was real, or if he had white medical tape or bandages covering it. I still can't decide, but his face was pure white and his head was very small. I still can't get it out of my head. After that, it was still dark, and we had a long hike through the woods to get back to where we came from. We felt as if we were being followed almost the whole way, and we almost took a route that was 2 miles out just to get away. There were weird noises like stomping feet, galloping, and screams. We tried to be quiet through the woods, but also tried to move quickly. We ended up making it back and made sure we weren't followed. I genuinely still don't know what that was, or if it was human, but I can't get this experience out of my head, and I know none of us will ever go back. I went to a quarry in McKinney, Texas, and I will never go back there again after what happened to me. Here is a little backstory so this will make sense. The first time I went to this quarry, it was pretty sketchy. Me and a couple of my friends, Josh and Miles, went to this quarry for cliff jumping, since we had seen some YouTube videos of people cliff jumping at it, and we found out that it was only about a half hour away from where we lived. Both Miles and I are old enough to drive, me being 16 and Miles being 17, so we thought that it would be a really good idea to go. Once we got to the quarry, it had a really sketchy vibe to it. There was a small dirt road that led up to the quarry, which made a circle around it. To the left were these ghetto-looking white buildings, which were pretty much just white metal boxes, and to the right was the fence that surrounded the rock path that led to the quarry. We drove down this road in Miles' Jeep, and there were tons of signs saying stuff like no trespassing or warning blasting zone, and there was even this big white piece of cardboard that read, "Trespassers will be shot on sight." It's important to note that in Texas, people can legally shoot you if you're on their property, but it just doesn't really happen much. We decided to drive back to the beginning of the road where there was this gravel parking lot by an old building which looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Miles parked the car, and we all reluctantly got out of the car and began our walk to the quarry. While we were walking, a truck drove right past us, and the driver just kind of looked at us with a blank expression on his face. Honestly, it was pretty scary when the car passed us, but the fact that he didn't do anything made us think maybe they don't care too much if we're on their property. We kept on walking, and then we came to the fence where we were supposed to jump to get onto the rock path that led to the quarry. We went to the smallest cliff jumping spot first, and saw a pretty big snake swimming in the water after the first 10 minutes of being there, so we decided to wander further down the quarry where we saw a decent-sized cliff, about 35 feet. After depth checking it, we spent about an hour cliff jumping there before we got bored and moved on to the next cliff. We were at the very end of the quarry, and we were walking down a path to get to a bigger spot when we saw a black Hummer stop. The lady in the Hummer was probably in her mid-30s. She rolled down the window and yelled, "What the f*** are you doing on my property?" It honestly kind of shocked us all, and I responded with saying in an innocent voice, "What do you mean? We thought this was public property." She knew we were lying straight to her face and yelled at us some more. Then she said something that I'll never forget. She picked up her phone and said, "John, get the gun." Me, Miles, and Josh all froze. We were scared to death. She said to follow her and drove slowly down the path about 20 feet to a gate. We decided to follow her. We were all saying that we were so sorry and that we would never come back again, and she let us go after saying the cops are on their way, so you better haul ass that way before they get here, and pointed towards the dirt path that led us away from her property. We told her thank you and ran faster than any of us thought we could. Then we got in the Jeep and drove away. I wish this was the end of the story, but it isn't. A couple of months later, Miles asked me if I would ever go to the quarry again, and I reluctantly told him that if we had a bigger group together, then I would go. We got a group of 5 together and went back to the quarry in my car. I drove, and after about an hour, we arrived at a church which we would be parking at, which was about 2 minutes away from the quarry. We didn't want the lady somehow seeing our car and getting our license plate number. We walked down the dirt road that led to the quarry and passed by a few cars. One car stopped next to us, and a guy who was probably in his early 20s told us to watch out for a black Hummer. We laughed and told him the story of what happened the first time that we went to the quarry, and then we were back to walking down the dirt road. We jumped the fence that surrounded the quarry and decided we would just go to the second spot, so that we would at least be a tiny bit out of sight of the dirt road. We were at the spot for about an hour and having fun when a silver van pulls up at the end of the dirt road about 25 yards away. It wasn't the black Hummer, so we weren't running away just yet, but we were getting our stuff ready in case we had to run. It was for the most part out of our sight due to trees being in between us and the van. We waited there for about a minute and thought that the guy was just doing something in the car when we heard 2 loud gunshots really close to us. The gunshots scared us half to death. The exit of the quarry was not very close, probably about 300 yards, and about 125 yards to get on the main dirt road which led off the property. I led the way, with my friend Aiden trailing not far behind me. I heard more gunshots about 40 yards away, and it sounded like he had shot about 8 shots so far, but when I looked back, I couldn't see the guy who was shooting at us. We got to the fence and jumped it, and we were now on the main dirt road that led to the exit. Out of pure luck, the guy we had talked to earlier, who had warned us about the black Hummer, was in his white truck on the dirt road. We begged him for a ride, and he gave us a ride back to the end of the property. We thanked him and then ran back to the car. We all got in the car and drove away, never to see that quarry again. Back in 2018, my cousin Ryan and I were really into urban exploration. We had been to old factories, shuttered schools, and forgotten farmhouses that looked like they were one good windstorm away from collapsing. We were not stupid about it. We checked floors before walking on them, wearing masks where there might be asbestos, and avoided any place that seemed like it might be actively guarded. Still, there was one place we'd been talking about for months that neither of us had worked up the nerve to try. The big abandoned house on the shore of Lake Harlow. It was the kind of property you only ever saw from a distance, sitting far back from the main road behind a set of tall iron gates that had been bent inward years ago. Pines and brush had grown wild around the driveway, hiding most of the place unless you caught a glimpse through the trees while driving past. Local rumors about the place were endless. The most common story was that a wealthy family had lived there in the 90s before suddenly disappearing. People claimed they'd left in the middle of the night without taking anything. Furniture, clothes, dishes, even family photos were supposedly still inside. Theories ranged from financial ruin to witness protection to something even darker. No one had ever bought it afterward, and the property had just sat there decaying for more than 2 decades. The afternoon we went, the weather was gray and still. We parked at a hiking trailhead about a half-mile from the property, and we walked in through the woods to avoid being seen from the road. As we got closer, the roofline appeared through the trees, and I realized just how big the place really was. 3 stories with tall windows and a wide wraparound porch, all in various stages of rot. Paint peeled off in long strips like sunburnt skin, and sections of the porch sagged inward. We circled around to the back, moving quietly in case there was anyone nearby. The back door was unlocked, and the moment we stepped inside, the air changed. The air was still and smelled faintly of lake water and dust. The kitchen was the first thing we saw. It looked like a movie set frozen in time. Plates were stacked neatly on the counter, and a coffee cup with a brown ring of dried residue sat beside the sink. The cabinet stood open, showing old boxes of food that were long expired. A faded calendar on the wall still hung open to May 1997. We moved through the downstairs slowly. The living room still had furniture draped in yellowed sheets. The fireplace was still filled with crumbling ash, like the last fire had burned out decades ago. Family photos were hung in the hallway, with people smiling at barbecues and dressed up for Christmas. Honestly, I got the chills for some reason as I looked at these photos. There was something eerie about seeing cheery family photos in a long-abandoned house. Some of the photos had sun-faded so badly that their faces were almost ghostly white. Upstairs is where things started to feel off. The first bedroom we entered had a perfectly made bed, but all the dresser drawers were open and completely empty. Another room's floor was entirely covered with newspapers from 1997, each one folded open to the classified ads section. I didn't think much of it until I noticed the dates. They were all from within the same week in July, and every circled ad was for private buyers looking for quiet transactions. The master bedroom was the strangest. The heavy curtains were drawn shut, but when I pulled them back, I found the windows had been boarded over from the inside. The closet door had a rusted padlock on it, and the floor in front of it was scratched, as if someone had tried to drag something heavy out but couldn't. Ryan wanted to force it open, but I talked him out of it. We didn't have tools, and I wasn't eager to break something in a place where we weren't supposed to be. He suggested we check the basement before leaving. The basement door was in a narrow hallway off the kitchen. When we opened it, a wave of damp, cool air came up that smelled strongly of mildew. The stairs were wooden, Each step down creaked like it might give way under us. The basement was big, with thick stone walls and wooden shelves along one side. Most were empty, except for a few rusted cans and a broken lantern. But in the center of the room, illuminated in our flashlight beams, were 5 chairs, all mismatched and old, but arranged in a perfect circle. Unlike everything else in the house, they weren't dusty. The seats looked recently used. I was about to whisper something to Ryan when we both froze. Somewhere above us, a door closed. The sound was clear as day, and it was followed by footsteps crossing the floor above. We killed our lights instantly and stood in the dark, barely breathing. The footsteps paused, then started again, moving toward the hallway above the basement. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. We hadn't seen any cars outside. We hadn't heard anyone else since we got here. Whoever was up there hadn't made a sound until now. The footsteps stopped again, this time directly above the basement door. Then the sound of the door handle rattling made my blood run cold. Ryan grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the far end of the basement where a small ground-level window sat broken and half covered by a rotting shutter. It was barely big enough to fit through, but we didn't care. I went first, scraping my jacket on the glass, dropping down into damp dirt outside. Ryan was right behind me. We sprinted into the tree line, not daring to look back until we were well into the woods. When I finally did glance over my shoulder, I saw the basement door wide open and someone standing in it. They were too far away to make out any details, just tall and still. It looked like their head was tilted slightly, like they were watching us. We didn't stop running until we reached the car. Both of us were so disturbed that we barely even spoke on the car ride home. That night I just kept replaying it in my head. Everything from the chairs, to the footsteps, to the locked closet, and then that horrifying image of that figure on the porch. So a couple weeks later, Ryan called me and told me that after he made a post in a Facebook group asking if anyone knows about the history of that house, an older guy responded to his post saying that there have been sightings of someone in that house, and the first guess would of course be a squatter. However, that wouldn't explain the strange, almost ritualistic looking circle of chairs in the basement. At this point, it's not my problem to worry about. I'm just happy we got out of there in one piece.